Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely fascinating piece of source material. It's an educational simulation called the Reconstruction, and the premise is just wild. Picture this. You step off a train on a warm April morning in 1866. You are the brand new Freedmen's Bureau Superintendent for Mercer County. You're suddenly standing in a society in total ruins, surrounded by 4 million newly freed people, and factions that frankly absolutely despise each other.
Okay, let's dive into this. Right away, you get a dispatch from Captain James Whelan, the federal garrison commander, and he tells you, I have 40 soldiers, I can keep order in Millhaven. Beyond that, you're on your own. He is blunt, he is stretched completely thin, and it perfectly sets this high-stakes, incredibly tense reality. You've got massive responsibilities, a county of 200 square miles, and basically zero resources to actually enforce your will.
So you've really got to ask yourself, can you rebuild the South? Or will your own biases betray you? Because here's the brilliant twist of this entire curriculum. This isn't just some dry history test where you memorize dates and names. No way. It is a psychological pressure cooker. It's an active test of your own human urges, your emotional reactions, pitting your own cognitive biases directly against harsh historical reality.
Section 1. Welcome to Mercer County. To really understand how this pressure cooker works, we first need to look at the sheer chaos you inherit the second you arrive. You are instantly pulled in 5 completely different directions by competing interests.
Let's break down the 5 factions sitting on your desk every single day. First, the radical Republicans. They're your patrons. They want aggressive change, but if you don't deliver fast, they'll replace you. Then you have the moderate Republicans. They want orderly reconciliation, and if you push too hard, they'll cut your funding. The Southern Democrats, they just want the pre-war hierarchy back, and their threat is simple. They know they can just outlast you. Then you've got the Freed People's Organizations. They're your most vulnerable allies, desperate for land and safety, but if you fail them, your whole coalition fractures. And finally, the planter aristocracy. They control the land, so you need them to fix the economy. Ignore them, and they'll stall the economy and starve the county. You literally cannot satisfy all of them. The entire simulation lives in these brutal, unforgiving trade-offs.
Which brings us to Section 2. The illusionists reveal the secret engine. Let's pull back the curtain and look at the instructional design underneath all of this. Because while the students think they're just playing a history game, they're actually being systematically evaluated.
Now, what's really interesting here is the dramatic irony of it all. See, throughout the simulation, there's a master playbook, a connection map that says right on it, confidential, teacher use only, do not distribute to students. The history they're experiencing, it's just the vehicle. The actual destination is exposing and managing human cognitive bias under extreme uncertainty.
Let me give you a perfect example of how this works. It's called the empathy gap. This specific bias springs on days 3 and 4 of the simulation. As a student, you read a dispatch about a horrific event, a brutal beating, a profound injustice. You're furious, right? You want justice right now. So you make this bold, resource-draining policy decision. But the secret engine is constantly asking, would you make that same heavy-handed, expensive decision after reading a boring dispatch about crop yields? You're making hot, emotional policy decisions, and the simulation is just quietly tracking it.
Take a look at this matrix. This is the teacher's master plan. Every 2 days, the simulation systematically springs a trap, testing a very specific cognitive bias. Days 1 and 2 target optimism bias. Students wildly overestimate what they can actually fix in week 1. Days 5 and 6 test the sunk cost fallacy. Are you going to double down on a failing strategy just because you've already invested in it? And days 11 and 12 test normalcy bias. That dangerous assumption that things will just magically return to normal, even as federal troops permanently pack up and leave. It is just a beautifully constructed psychological gauntlet.
Section 3, the economy of power. So how does the game actually force these biases to the surface? It all comes down to political capital, the brutal math that forces you to choose between immediate emotional justice and sustainable systems.
Every single student starts this simulation with exactly 100 political capital. That's it, 100. It's a deliberately tight budget, and every single policy choice you make drains this number.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is where the math gets devilish. You are constantly presented with options. Option A is the bold choice. High impact, dramatic, and man, it feels morally satisfying right in the moment. But it costs 8 to 12 political capital. Contrast that with option C, the cautious choice. This is incremental institution building. It's slow, low drama, and honestly, kind of boring, but it only costs 1 to 3 political capital. So what happens? Well, if a student gives in to their emotions and goes with the all-bold strategy every time, they will completely bankrupt their political capital by day 10. They literally hit -16 capital. They're left totally powerless exactly when the backlash hits. Meanwhile, the student who swallowed their pride and took the boring, cautious route, they arrive at the end with 69 capital to spare, having built a quieter but much sturdier record.
Section 4. Cascading historical consequences. Because these choices, they don't happen in a vacuum. The simulation features this brilliant AI-resistant butterfly effect, where your early decisions will come back to haunt you over a week later.
Let's trace the main load-bearing thread of the entire simulation. On day 2, you have to set a posture regarding a new schoolhouse and agricultural land. It seems like an isolated choice at the time, but that specific choice is recorded by the teacher, and it just sleeps. It waits until day 10, an episode literally titled Old Ghosts, where it cascades back as a highly personalized consequence.
And this brilliantly illustrates the harsh reality of historical policy. Say you chose option A on day 2, confronting the planters, redistributing confiscated land by force. Well, by day 10, a state court rules your actions unconstitutional. The freed people who planted crops are evicted, and your federally funded school is exhausted and collapsing. But if you chose option C on day 2, quietly training local teachers and building up an arbitration board, by day 10, you have an unglamorous but spreading network of community schools run by locals who aren't going anywhere. Imposing a just rule from the top down often collapses, while quietly building local capacity actually spreads. Which brings us to the final act, Section 5, the legacy you leave. The year is 1876. The federal troops receive orders to permanently withdraw. You must finally face what you have actually built without the protection of the military.
Day 13 is the absolute emotional peak of the simulation. The teacher reads the legacy report aloud to the students, detailing exactly what happened to their specific district 10 years later, in 1887, and it's read in complete extended silence. The historical pattern of Reconstruction is laid completely bare. If you built schools with local teachers and courts with local legitimacy, they survived. But if your institutions depended on the presence of federal soldiers, they collapsed instantly. Every dramatic intervention you force through is universally reversed. So the crucial point is exactly this. Institutions survive, interventions collapse. That is the ultimate, profound verdict of the simulation. Permanence only ever comes from what is deeply institutionalized and locally owned. It's not a moral verdict on what is right or wrong in a vacuum. It is the brutal historical pattern that the simulation forces the student to experience firsthand.
Which leaves us with the exact, provocative final reflection prompt given to the students on day 14. Name a present-day institution still fighting this exact tension between what is right and what will last. The tensions of 1877 didn't end when the troops left. We are still navigating our own empathy gaps, our own sunk costs, and our own desires for quick interventions over slow institution building today. I highly recommend taking a moment to look at the world right now through this incredibly clarifying lens. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer, and keep learning.